What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the other side of the Firewall podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breaker, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name's Ryan Williams. As always, I'm joined by Shannon Times.
What's up? What's up?
What's going on? So, welcome to Wednesday's episode. So, our discussion episode. Monday and Tuesday, our topics. Thursday will be Ask SSP, where my guest will be Dr. Joseph J. Burt Miller Jr. So if you have not already, please go ahead and check him out on LinkedIn. He has a wealth of knowledge, as well as he provides resources, he speaks, all that good stuff. So definitely check out our episode with him. And then Fridays, everything else, movies, books, games. We got a lot to talk about this week. So without further ado, I'll give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. This article's from theregister.com. It's written by Jessica Lyons Hardcastle. And this it's kind of funny. When I read this, I thought about it's the New York Post. It does like the funny headlines, right? So like to me, it was funny. It says Clorox CISO flushes self after multimillion-dollar attack. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, this is definitely a New York Post or whatever that is.
Terrible.
Funny. Yeah, those funny headlines and whatnot. I was like, flush itself. But what it turns out to be, Clorox, they suffered a data breach, right? So their chief security officer left the job in the wake of corporate network breach that cost the manufacturer hundreds of millions of dollars. So not tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the way they substantiate this, right, is it's always tied to like stock and stuff like that, right? So like in this quarter, when it comes to earnings and things of that nature, this is what they lost, which, all right, that's cool, right? So like it's net sales, right? It was a $356 million decrease, right? That's a lot of money, right? And they say it was driven largely by the cyber attack. That's what they assume. Let me not say that's what they assume. They've done some type of studying or something. They've done some type of research to say, yes, we're down 356 million in sales because of this, right? So, but Clorox, the expenses are related to the network break-in, according to them, right? So, and this time frame is 3 months ending September 30th, right? So, it's 24 million lost from 3 months ending September 30th, is what they're saying. So, because of this, the CISO, got to go, right? Like they're just like, this is what's going to happen. So, they declined to say if the CISO is still on staff, which means they're not, right? So Amy Bojack, B-O-G-A-C, Bogak, was the CISO and was also the VP of Enterprise Security and Infrastructure at Clorox. And she was there for a couple of years, so June 2021, according to her LinkedIn profile. But her LinkedIn profile doesn't have any job changes, but again, says flushes self, right? Like that's what the New York Post-ish type article says, right? Clorox CISO flushes self after multi-million-dollar cyber attack. So, but yeah, this is so here's my thing with this. So is it proper for them to say, okay, I'm going to resign or do whatever if it doesn't seem that they're at fault? And I don't know for sure, right? So because in this article, they talk about how she was always talking about cybersecurity best practices externally across the company. She had this series called Lunch with a Leader that she did, and she tried to influence and educate others on cybersecurity awareness and relevant topics, right? So if she was doing all of this, right, as the CISO, and again, I don't have the background on this, is she the scapegoat in this instance? Like, was it one of those things where the company took this hit and they were like, okay, somebody's got to pay for it, right? And it's not going to be the CEO, CFO, COO, CISO, it's you, right? So I would imagine that if she was going out and doing all these things, doing the series, going out and educating people, not just sitting back and collecting money, she was trying to be proactive in what should be happening at the company as well. It's my thinking, right? Like you're not just doing this and then going back to work and then not doing anything at all. So should she be the one to take the fall for this, right? Because if she's going out and doing all the education and things like of that nature, like the hope or my thinking behind this is that she wants to be the one to sit there and be like, hey, I want to fix this, right? Like I want to learn and know how we could do better and prevent this from happening again in the future. But again, because you lost over $300 million, in revenue, they're probably not willing to take that chance, or like, we'll just bring somebody else in, right? And maybe it's cheaper to do that, you know what I mean, to bring somebody else in and sit and let her do it, although I find that hard to believe. But I'm curious to see how this went about, whether or not, and I don't know if it'll ever come to light, whether or not she just sat back and did nothing and was just putting on a front, like, hey, I care about all these things and then didn't, or if she was trying to do something and was rejected. Because again, especially a big company like Clorox, right? Like the CEO is more than likely going to make these decisions on where money gets spent in
Right.
cybersecurity, right? So she can come up to all those C-suite members and be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, right? Chief this, chief this, and they could be like, nah, it's more money than we want to spend, right? So, ship more wipes out, more Clorox wipes, ship them out. You know what I mean? That's what we want to spend money on, not cybersecurity. So I don't know. I'm curious how this is going to go down in the future, and if we're going to hear more on what she was actually doing behind the scenes. But what's your thoughts on this, Ryan?
Yes. So I from the outside looking in, because we don't have enough information, but this happened back in August, right? So in August is when they suffered their breach, and they've been trying to recover and get back to steady state or normal operations since then. I think scapegoat. I think it's um, because everyone who's talking about her seems to be talking about positively in what she was doing, her influence and all that other stuff within the community. It most likely was like, hey, someone has to take this hit, or it could be that this is getting in the way of her doing her other efforts, right? Like having to clean up this mess. Puns for days, right? Like not intentional. Like in the article, it talks about him, like the new person who stepped into her shoes, the person who's under her is mopping up the mess. Like the puns are terrible, but but um most than likely it's in my very uh, it, it, amateur, I guess, perspective, like my very unscientific perspective on it. They needed someone to take the fall to continue to pivot and to satiate um their shareholders. So they're
Shareholders.
like, you will, hopefully receive some kind of good severance package and move about to bigger and better things. When really it should be whoever has the purse, right? Whoever actually is spending the money, because all she could do is being abdicated. Because even in the article, she said she was a champion for cybersecurity and built a lot of their teams and what have you. So most likely it was like, hey, someone has to take this hit. It's not going to be any of these people who actually are in control. So we're going to bring it down to the CISO. And that's why CISOs are quitting. Like that's why CISOs don't want the role or the responsibility. And we see a lot of articles because they constantly are taking the fall, which is it's very surprising, right? You're supposed to be, this person's the liaison between the technical and the business side, and they're not getting the traction they need, and they either are let go or they walk away. So it may be that she just walked away. She was just like, you know what, I've done all I could do here, and now someone else needs to imbue their vision on what we do next, right? Again, like I haven't. Most of my experiences in the military, so I haven't worked with a lot of civilian companies, but the ones I did work with, I saw a lot of CISO turnover. Like I would just talk to somebody about starting or client consulting relationship, and they're like, "Yeah, I just got here." You're like, "What?" It's because like the other person either walked away or got fired or what have you. Like, there's a lot of turnover in that seat. And when you talk to the people underneath them doing the assessment, they're like I used to hear like, "Yeah, this was this person's vision, and we that's why we did this. This was this person's vision, that's why we did that." Like they've had gone through like two or three sizzles in the past 2 or 3 years, which that's a lot of churn, right? For what you would hope would be a pretty steady state position, but it doesn't seem to be so. Like people get in, they just like, hey, this was a lot. This was a lot. So moving on. So I wish her nothing but bigger and better things, right? Like because she did have the the community, she did have her efforts. Hopefully she gets to continue that elsewhere, or maybe she just does that permanently, right? Because I think it's easier to be a champion when you don't have to be in the seat than being a champion and have that pressure being in the seat. Because you can preach all day, but if the C-suite being the pulpit isn't receptive, then what do? Right? So that's where I lean. And then them saying that they can't talk about, present or former colleagues. Yeah, because HR would get in that butt. Like You're not supposed to do that. I don't even know why journalists ask that question. Of course, we're not going to talk about it. Like, that person either has to talk about it or it has to be some kind of public record, right? Like, we can't talk about hiring and firing and all that stuff. Like, we'll have, we'll take another revenue hit when she sues us, right? For slander or whatever. So, yeah, very interesting. It's unfortunate. Again, it took a while before she decided to resign, or that's what we speculate that she resigned from the article, right? Perhaps she was getting things in place, and then she got to a point where like, okay, now somebody else can take the mantle, and I can go do something different.
Or because they figured out what their hit was going to be over that 300 million, and they were like, okay, we need to restore that trust, right? Shareholders
Right.
aren't or I can't even say shareholders really, because if they say it's because of net sales, it's because like the general public has lost interest, right? Like I don't know, like for you to use.
Yeah, it sounds like their supply chain got disrupted. That's what it sounds like. Like something brought them down long enough where now there is which surprisingly I did look for Clorox and it was not like there was a time where I thought it was because of COVID, right? I thought it was a backlog or whatever, but now this makes more sense. It's more in sync with what I saw on the shelves at like Publix. Like there wasn't a lot of Clorox around. So it must have been hard enough where it disrupted their ability to get material out the door or produce material. And now they're just not catching up because now I see Clorox. But again, this is November, right?
Maybe you could be on
Yeah.
something.
So that is interesting because I didn't know that this was a thing. Because everything that gets backed up, I assume COVID. But now we're kind of out of COVID, so I should start to not assume it's COVID situation any longer. But for a time there, like everything, like you couldn't even buy a vehicle, right? Couldn't get the chips. Like you get a car with no brain. It's crazy out there. But now we starting to see that supply and demand starting to equal out. But in this case, it was not. And like you said, yeah, 300 million is a lot of money. So they save a little bit by gapping the position, but then they, like you said, they may save a lot of it in regaining public trust and that of their shareholders. But that seat is hot. Being a CISO is no joke because you don't control your own destiny, is what it seems like.
That's
So
true.
I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do about that because you're gonna see less and less in the wake of this. And then we talked about earlier in the year how it's really hard to keep women within the field anyway, just because of how toxic it is, how it's not very rewarding, right? Like people get in, they get good, and then they bounce, which is the exact opposite of what we're looking for, right? During the pandemic, we were pulling people in, like we want you and your expertise to come this way, and now people are getting a taste of it after a year or so, and they're just like, I don't know about this. This cybersecurity, all your regulations and nonsense, like we try to conform, but then we can't because budget budget constraints, right? Like nobody wants to spend the money on it. So it's a really weird cycle that we're in. Hopefully, they right the ship. But again, good luck to her. Hopefully everything works out and that she can focus her efforts on all the things that she was champion. So definitely continue to tune in throughout the week. So Monday, Tuesday are topics, Wednesday discussion. Thursday will be Ask SSP with, I don't know why I was just don't leave this up. Dr. Joseph J. Burt Miller Jr. So definitely check that one out. And then Friday's everything else: movies, books, games, TV shows. So we've seen a lot, we've watched a lot. Now we're going to talk a lot about it. So that was improv, bars. Stay,
Bars.
tune, tune in throughout the week. Hit us up at social medias that go by our name. You can hit me up personally. I'm at RyRy Security Guy. That's RYRY Security Guy. You can find me on LinkedIn, Clubhouse, Twitter, and Threads. Stay safe, stay secure.